Hello and greetings from UB. On behalf of the Office of Alumni Engagement and the UB School of Management, we are delighted you are able to join us for today's webinar presentation. My name is Christy Fields and I serve as the Director of Alumni Lifelong Engagement here at UB. And I'm also joined by my wonderful colleague, Joy Rona, who will assist in answering any questions. We are both so grateful you are with us today for this educational opportunity. Since 1923, the UB School of Management has been developing leaders and making an impact on individuals, businesses, and communities around the world. In their mission to define the future of management, Dean Iyer has unified the school around four distinct areas of focus: business analytics, social impact of management, business of climate change, innovation, entrepreneurship, and leadership. Each of these initiatives are helping to realize their vision of a world of transformational leaders and organizations who change society for the better. With that said, we are excited to welcome today's featured presenter, UB alumna Dr. Courtney J. Burris. CJ is a clinical assistant professor of management science and systems in the UB School of Management. She earned her master's and PhD from the UB School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, with a strong background in diversity, equity, and inclusion research. Additionally, she is the CEO and co-founder of RHM Innovations, a Buffalo-based durable medical equipment company specializing in manufacturing assistive shower devices. In today's session, CJ will provide a unique perspective on cultivating an equitable workplace and fostering a sense of belonging for all employees. CJ will speak to supporting a diverse workforce by implementing practices such as using preferred pronouns and correct names, creating an accessible environment, and respecting various identities encompassing gender, religion, race, and more. We will leave some time during today's webinar for Q&A. If you have any questions during the presentation, please submit them using your Q&A on your Zoom taskbar. You can send those to us at any time. In addition, CJ has so kindly uploaded her slides. You're going to find those in the resource section of your Zoom taskbar, and you can download those at any time. And like I said, we are going to save some time for Q&A, so make sure to submit those at any time through the presentation. And as a reminder, we are going to record today's session, and you're going to receive an email within the next 24 hours. And now it is my pleasure to turn it over to our featured presenter, a proud UB alumna and my colleague here on campus, CJ Burris. Welcome, CJ.
Thank you. So my first slide was a who am I slide, but you covered most of the bases. So I have my PhD in industrial engineering from UB, and now I'm working at UB. I have 4 years of research experience in engineering education, which is outside of what I did with my PhD. And most of that work focuses on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And then with that, I do have a company and it focuses on assistive devices for disabled individuals or older adults. So I actually brought in some examples from what we do with our company for accessibility purposes that I'm going to share with you. And my pronouns are she, her. They are included here. And they're also on my Zoom name. I will talk about that at some point in the lecture. So I have an agenda, guidelines for the workshop. Whenever you have a DEI workshop, it's really important to set guidelines for appropriate discussion and to set a tone for respect. I'm going to cover what diversity, equity, and inclusion is. A lot of people lump these three terms together, but they're actually very different. And then I'm going to make a business case about the importance of DEI. Typically, I would make a historical case, but being in the School of Management, I opted for a business case for this presentation. And then I have a bunch of stuff on equitable workplace strategies, actionable steps for inclusion. So I tried to cover a lot of breadth in this workshop, while also including some actionable steps that you can take with you and implement even today. So I have some on the basics that would be terminology, names, gender inclusivity, religious inclusivity, racial equity, disability equity and inclusion, and inclusivity for working parents. And then I have a bunch of additional resources for you because this is only an hour-long workshop. I could give an hour-long workshop on each of those bullet points alone, and I would still have more to say. So I have a lot of additional resources, and I'm hoping that this can be the start of a conversation. And if you want to learn more, there's a lot of material there for you to go through. So starting with the guidelines for this workshop, I ask that you listen deeply and respectfully. Sometimes conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion can be difficult or uncomfortable. So I urge you to listen deeply and respectfully, ask questions respectfully. If anybody shares any details about themselves, accept one another's reality, and this goes for this workshop or just out in life, lived experiences are valid, yours and other people's. Ask compassionate questions. And if there's something at all that I say that you don't understand, feel free to ask, and I can give you an answer to the best of my ability. Challenge yourself. Again, conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion can be kind of uncomfortable sometimes. So I ask that you open yourself up to learn and to grow and to challenge yourself. Expect to experience some discomfort. Again, sometimes these things can be uncomfortable to talk about if you're not used to the conversation. And allow others to learn what you already know. So if you're somebody who does have a lot of experience with initiatives around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you want to share those, I implore you to do so, and hope that you allow others to learn what you already know. And then respect confidentiality. If anybody does end up sharing a story, you can take the stories, but leave the names. And so those are the guidelines for this workshop. It really all centers around respect, and opening yourself up to growth. So I'm going to start with an overview of what diversity, equity, and inclusion is. So again, a lot of people tend to lump diversity, equity, and inclusion together. They can also be put together with belonging, which is a B, or accessibility, which is an A. So if you see something like a DEAI or a DEIB, that's what that means. So diversity means the presence of differences. So that's where you have a lot of different perspectives in the same room together, or you have diversity in your efforts, in your hiring efforts. So you're trying to bring on people of different genders, people of different races, people of different religions. Equity is where you have fair access, opportunity, and support. So now you brought people into the workplace that are from diverse backgrounds, but you have to have access and opportunities to actually support them to make it an equitable workplace. And then inclusion. That's fostering a genuine sense of belonging and value. So that's making the people that work for you or with you feel like they're actually included and belong in the room. So starting with diversity. Diversity describes the presence of difference within any collection of people, and it addresses differences in social groups. These can be related to race, indigenous identity, class, gender identity or expression, sexuality, ability, ethnicity, and religion. It covers a lot of ground, or a lot of different groups. And discussions about diversity are linked to access and equity. They require knowledge and understanding of historical and contemporary experiences of oppression and exclusion. So I will say in a typical DEI workshop, I would focus very heavily on the historical and contemporary experiences. I would discuss the 5 faces of oppression. I would talk about critical race theory. But for the purposes of this workshop, I didn't touch on it quite as deep, but I did include some extra resources because I really wanted you to leave here with some action items. So for equity, I'm sure all of you here have seen an image like the one on the right before, where there's equality on the left-hand side, where you have a tall person, a child, and somebody in a wheelchair, where they each have a box. So that's equal treatment, but it's not equitable because one person didn't need the box to begin with. The child can barely see over it anyway, and a box does not help somebody in a wheelchair. So equity would be if you were to give 2 boxes to the child and build a ramp for somebody in a wheelchair. So equity means sometimes different treatment, but giving the treatment that somebody actually needs. So equity, unlike the notion of equality, is not about sameness of treatment. Equity denotes fairness in justice and process and in results. And equitable outcomes often require differential treatment and resource distribution. So putting those resources really where they are most needed to hopefully achieve a level playing field among all individuals and communities. So my personal favorite example, distinguishing equity from equality. I saw this on a Tumblr post actually. It was a first grade teacher and how she teaches the difference between equity and equality to her first graders. So she had a box of Band-Aids and she went to the first student and she said, okay, pretend you have a boo-boo. Where is it? And the student said, well, I have a boo-boo on my finger. So she put the Band-Aid on the kid's finger. She went to the next student and asked where they have a boo-boo. And the student said, oh, on my elbow. And she put the Band-Aid on the kid's finger. So she went to the next student and they said, oh, my knee hurts. And she put the Band-Aid on their finger. And then she goes through the entire class and says, I gave you all equal treatment. I gave you a Band-Aid on your finger. But you'll notice that some of you had boo-boos elsewhere that didn't end up getting treated. So that was equal treatment, but it wasn't equitable. So sometimes I'm going to have to spend more time or do different things to help support someone else. And you might not quite understand why I'm doing that, but it's because they have a boo-boo somewhere else. So I really like that example. I think that it explains it really well that you can give resources to everybody, but it doesn't mean that it's equitable. And this requires recognizing and addressing barriers to provide opportunity for all individuals and communities to thrive in the workplace environment. So this takes a lot of work. You need to stop and recognize what barriers might be in place in your workplace and how do you actually go about doing the work to address those. So I do have some methods for you on how to do that. And then inclusion. So inclusion refers to the notion of belonging, somebody feeling welcome, having a sense of citizenship, and the capacity to engage and succeed in a given institution, program, or setting. So what we're seeing happen now is, at least in the university sphere, there's a lot of universities that started diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, but they had the diversity part, they didn't have the equity or the inclusion. And because of that, a lot of these faculty members or staff members are now leaving because they don't feel like they have the resources necessary and they don't feel included or a sense of belonging. Because diversity it's really the bare minimum. You need to have a room of diverse perspectives, but it doesn't really do you any good if that room is not equitable and also inclusive of everybody. So inclusion calls for recognizing, reducing, and removing barriers to participation and belonging. And it sometimes entails the change or the reimagination of such institutions, programs, or settings. So sometimes you need to go back to the building blocks, review all of your policies, and try to find where there are areas that could be causing harm and work to remove those. And it also means welcoming and valuing all members of the workplace community. So again, diversity, having a lot of diverse hires is great, but it doesn't mean much if they come in and they don't feel welcome in the environment that you've created. So we really need to work towards an equitable and inclusive workplace. So that's high level what diversity, equity, and inclusion is. I have a piece talking about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion making a business case. So again, typically I would discuss really in depth the historical significance, the 5 faces of oppression. I'd hit you with a bunch of research, but we're all in the School of Management, so I opted for a business case this time. And why diversity, equity, and inclusion measures really are just good business. So I wanted to start with this short video. It's a video about microaggressions, explaining what they are, and comparing them to mosquito bites. It's 2 minutes. This is one of my favorite videos out there to share. So microaggressions are indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of marginalized groups. I had a conversation with another entrepreneur the other day, and he was saying that he accidentally called a trans man ma'am. And that person ended up getting very upset with them and angry with him. And he couldn't understand why, because it was an honest mistake. Why would somebody get so upset? It seemed like a disproportionate reaction. But it's because a lot of people that exist on the margins face microaggressions or just full force aggressions multiple times a day on a daily basis. And it gets to be a lot. So I'm going to share this video with you.
For people who still don't think that microaggressions are a problem,
Oh, you're so well spoken.
just imagine instead of being a stupid comment, a microaggression is a mosquito bite.
Ugh, it's a compliment.
Mosquito bites and their itch are one of nature's most annoying features. But if you're only bitten every once in a while,
No, where are you really from?
Cleveland?
sure, it's annoying, but it's not that big a deal. The problem is that some people get bitten by mosquitoes a lot more than other people. I mean, a lot more. Whether it's on a date,
Oh, your English is so good.
Excuse me?
going grocery shopping,
You know, everything happens for a reason.
I'm just buying apples.
commuting to work,
So when are you gonna have a baby?
watching TV,
We have to keep the Redskins name. It's part of our culture and history.
or just walking down the street with your partner.
I couldn't even tell you were gay.
Mosquitoes seem to pop up everywhere.
Do you know John? Give me shopping advice. I love Cher too.
And getting bit by mosquitoes every goddamn day,
Can I touch your hair?
multiple times a day,
So pretty.
Can I touch it, please?
Please. Can I please?
is fucking annoying. And makes you want to go ballistic on those mosquitoes, which seems like a huge overreaction to people who only get bit every once in a while.
It's just a mosquito bite. Who cares? Just another angry black woman.
Of course, beyond just being annoying, some mosquitoes carry truly threatening diseases that can mess up your life for years.
Astrophysics? Maybe you should try this challenging major.
Ow, my dreams.
And other mosquitoes carry strains that can even kill you.
He looked like he was up to trouble, okay? I felt threatened.
So next time you think someone's overreacting, just remember, some people experience mosquito bites all the time.
You're all so exotic. Wow.
And by mosquito bites, we mean microaggressions.
Okay, so I really like that video. I think it does a really good job of explaining why microaggressions really add up over time in a funny way. So feel like this is in here. I included the link so you can share it. So that's microaggressions. Now, I want to talk about the value of diversity and perspective. Having diversity on your team, in your workplace. And the example I want to use is Pinky Gloves. So Pinky Gloves was a company founded by two men where they created disposable, single-use pink gloves for women to use when menstruating to make it a quote-unquote more hygienic process. They actually put a lot of money and a lot of time into this company, and then they went and pitched it on the German version of Shark Tank and actually got investment from this man on the left. As soon as that episode aired, there was public outrage. If you search Pinky Gloves, they had to disband. They're not in business anymore. But everything about them is just about the backlash. So this is just a screenshot of some videos I found. But the reason this is an issue isn't just because it is a female product made by two men, but because it perpetuates the harmful stigma around menstruation. Again, labeling it as a dirty thing, something where it's unhygienic when it's a natural process. So when they aired this, they had to actually come out and make a public apology about it. But had they actually consulted women or had women on their team, it might not have gotten to the point where they were in public pitching this idea and facing public scrutiny and backlash. So this is just one example. This happens all the time, whether it's not having a woman on your team or not having somebody from different races or religions on your team. You see it in marketing efforts. I have in the additional resources, I think it's like the first 4 articles are all examples of marketing gone wrong because they didn't have diverse perspectives in the room where the decisions were made. And it ended up having some sort of public backlash for the company. Again, this is just one example. And then I want to talk about the effect of inequity, or specifically inaccessibility, on your brand. So, did you know that ADA compliance extends outside of your physical work location, and it actually extends to your website? Companies need to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So this link goes to an article all about online compliance with the ADA. And ADA compliance lawsuits, specifically for the online sphere, are on the rise. Research shows they've quadrupled since 2018, and they've increased by like 350% since 2013. A lot of people neglect the online space. They don't think about accessibility in terms of their websites or anything that they're putting out to the public. They think about it in terms of having a ramp into the office, making sure that you have a handicapped bathroom, but it's far more than that. So the example that I want to give is actually my own website. So we are an accessibility company, and that's something that is obviously super important to me. But especially if we're going to be an accessibility company and we're going to market ourselves that way, we need to put our money where our mouths are. And we need to hold true to that. So this is our website. When we were having this constructed, the number one thing that I said that we needed is to make sure that it is accessible. If somebody is coming here and they have a visual impairment, there is alt text. If somebody is coming here and they have a hearing impairment, there's, alt text on any videos that we have, that kind of thing. So we have this menu. It's called User Way. It's a super easy way to just make your entire website accessible. It has, you can change it to oversized widgets. So if somebody can't see very well, it can make everything super large for them. You can change the contrast. You can highlight links. All of these things that just make it a lot easier for somebody to interact with your website. And this is very low-hanging fruit. This is just a plugin that you can put on any website. Again, it's User Way. Sorry. In case of that didn't work, I just put a snapshot of that toolbar here so you can see it. And then finally, a lack of inclusion within the workplace leads to low employee retention. And especially right now where we're seeing a lot of people, the Great Resignation, a lot of people leaving their jobs, looking for something else. One of the reasons that they found is because they do not feel a sense of inclusivity or belonging in their workplace. So a lack of diversity in your workplace might unintentionally foster hostility and increase turnover. So this lack of diversity can also lead to a lack of inclusivity. There was a study done by MIT Sloan that found that employee perception of a company culture is 10 times more predictive of attrition and turnover than compensation. And 70% of recruits are researching a company's culture before they ever go into an interview. It is more important than it has ever been to have a good and inclusive company culture. And so the message is clear. Employees do not want to work in a toxic company culture. So we need to find ways to fix this and to improve it and to make our workplaces more inclusive. So this is from another study, and this looked at respondents by demographic that suggests certain employees are prone to feel less included. So there's a link to this study. There's more than just this one graph. But basically what it shows is a majority of the people in across these different groups do not feel included in their workplace. And that can be something that's really adding to low retention and high turnover rates. I will say the one caveat here is that 65% of LGBTQ plus respondents did say they feel included, but on the study, they actually say that the reason for that is because a lot of them were actually senior leaders and had access to more opportunities than just a typical employee would anyway. But it's a very interesting study if you want to read more into it. It talks not just about who feels included, but also just in general what a lack of inclusivity does on your retention rates. And then I want to talk about the impact of spreading awareness for diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. So we're seeing this happen a lot. A lot of companies are putting out social media posts, but it's not enough just to put out a social media post. You really need to stand by what you're putting out. So Dove does an incredible job at this. Dove did their own research. They did years worth of research to find out where beauty standards were, how people are impacted by race-based hair discrimination. They did a bunch on people's confidence and feelings towards their own hygienic practices. So they have multiple campaigns. One of them, the one on the left, they said, our new research shows that 73% of Saudi girls feel pressured to conform to unrealistic beauty standards overnight. And then they started sharing just natural videos and photos of women and saying, like, you are a woman and you are beautiful just how you are, just existing. And then they also did a study on race-based hair discrimination. And they did this with LinkedIn, where they were really pushing the fact that Black hair should not be criminalized in the workplace. And they said, oh, it isn't a culture fit. So they put together a video to basically raise awareness. But it's more than just social media posts for them. They do research and they share that research so that other people have it. They also have initiatives like confidence kits, where it's essentially an educational packet to help parents or caregivers have conversations around hygiene in a way that isn't going to make somebody feel bad about themselves. So it's very interesting. I think that they've done an incredible job, not just in spreading awareness for these issues on social media, but really standing by it with the policies that they have. So if you ever want a company to look at, it's more than just these two examples. Dove has done a really incredible job. So that is my business case for why diversity, equity, inclusion is so important, and that it is actually vital for the success of your business. And with that, I have a bunch of strategies that you can take that are action oriented. There is some information in here, just what I thought was necessary to understand what I was talking about. But I tried to really focus on action items that you could take from here and go right into your workplace and implement with your coworkers or your employees, depending on what your position is. So these are equitable workplace strategies, actionable steps for inclusion. We're going to start with the basics. Use inclusive language. I know that this can sometimes be really difficult because it seems like the inclusive language is constantly changing, and sometimes it is. I personally reference a lot of glossaries, or if I'm talking to somebody and I don't know the proper term to use, I'll just ask them, how do you want me to refer to you? What is your preference? So that I know that whatever I'm saying is going to be inclusive for them. So be gender neutral, use gender neutral pronouns, avoid assigning gender to people. We do this all the time. Like if you were in a meeting room and there was a jacket left on a chair, you might say, oh, somebody left their jacket. You're not going to say, oh, somebody left his or her jacket. You're going to say somebody left their jacket. That's gender neutral. It's something that we already use. We just typically don't think about it. Put people first, focus on the person, not their characteristics. So it could be an individual with disabilities versus just disabled. But again, this also comes down, I think, to the person and what their preference is and what they would like to be called. Avoid generalizations. Don't assume someone's identity. You know what they say about making assumptions. When in doubt, you can ask or just opt for more gender neutral terms. Use plain language. This is so that it can be understood by anyone, especially if somebody doesn't have English as their first language. Using plain language is a more effective way to communicate rather than using a lot of jargon. So how you can do this in application. So you can look at your company's designs and images and make sure that they reflect a diverse group of people. You'll see that the images that I chose for this PowerPoint, I tried to pick a lot of diverse pictures. So it's not all just pictures of white women in here. I tried to pick a lot of diverse images. But this also does not mean to tokenize your employees. I feel like sometimes we swing a little too far where you want to have diverse groups of people on your brochures, on your website. So you'll focus on like the one Black person you have working for you, and you'll paste them everywhere. And while the intention might be good, sometimes that is very exhausting for the person, and it can make them feel as if they are a token. And then remove any gendered pronouns or language from all job offerings. Use plain language that does not assume the gender, sexual preference, race, or disability status of a candidate. When you use gendered language or non-inclusive language on job postings, then somebody who might exist in the margins is going to think that that job is not right for them, even before they ever get to the application stage. And then I have two glossaries here with different terms and language that you can use. So the first one is from Harvard's HR department. It's a glossary with brief explanations. It's good. It covers all of the terms that you need, but it's not very thorough. And then Algonquin College did a fantastic job. So this is a glossary with thorough explanations. Not only does it give you an explanation of why you're using that term, but there's actually material in there that will teach you and include more than even I have in this PowerPoint. And again, with the basics, use a person's name. So according to Race Equality Matters, 73% of people had their name mispronounced, and 43% made them said it made them feel disrespected. 21% said it made them feel like they didn't belong. A lot of people will mispronounce a name and not think it's a big deal, but when your name is constantly being mispronounced, it can make you feel othered. It can make you feel like you don't belong. And again, it can make you feel really disrespected. And this is something that's really basic. Just ask somebody what their name is, what they prefer to be called, and how to pronounce it. I work with a lot of international students, so I have to learn a lot of international names. A lot of my students this semester are from India, so I had them make name tags so that I can learn their names. And I put out a survey at the beginning of the semester that asks for their preferred name and like how to pronounce it. And I actually practice it because it's really important that people get to be called by their name. Again, this one is very simple. Just ask them. And note that a person's name may change. And there's a lot of reasons that it may change. And you should respond respectfully by changing how you refer to them. So one example of this is me. So my name is Courtney, but I prefer to go by CJ. I've never gotten pushback on that. No one's ever been like, oh, I'm not going to call you that. Everyone's like, okay, I'll call you what you prefer to be called. And it's simple. Sometimes it's marriage. Somebody might get married and change their last name. And we don't have a problem with changing how we refer to them in that sense. Similarly, if they get divorced. Where people tend to have a problem using a person's name is either if they're international and they feel like they can't pronounce the name, so they just give them an English name. But just take a second and think about how it might feel if you were to meet somebody and you said, hi, my name is Courtney. And they said, oh, that's too difficult. I'm going to call you Bob instead. Like, that's not my name, you know? So try to put yourself in their shoes and how that might feel. The last example is if somebody is transitioning. So they might have a dead name, which is the name that they were called pre-transition. And then they might change their name after they transition, though not everybody chooses to. And this I feel like is when people have a difficult time changing how you refer to people. But it's no different than if I said, oh, I prefer to be called CJ, or if somebody gets married or divorced and has a name change. So this one is simple. Be respectful, call them by what they wish to be called by, and be flexible if that changes. So that's the basics. Now we're going to hop into gender terminology. So I have this because I just want to explain the difference between gender and sex. So sex is what is assigned at birth. That has to do with like actually your genitals. Gender identity is how you identify yourself. And then gender attribution is how other people perceive you. And then gender expression is how you want to display your gender. These are all different things. Just because somebody wears a dress, it doesn't make them a woman. They can be a man that just happens to like wearing dresses, and that is okay. That is how they're expressing themselves. So there's a lot more in here that I don't have time to unpack, but this is a gender terminology guide link. So if you click here, it'll take you to a guide with all of the terminology and explanations. And I think it also includes a discussion on like why these things are important. But for gender inclusivity, the most basic thing that we can do is use correct pronouns. So according to, again, oh, this is a mistake. I wasn't supposed to have that. I'm sorry. Ask your employees for their correct pronouns. It's important. We all like to be called something that resonates with us. So also offer opportunities to normalize the use of pronouns. Like you'll see in my Zoom name, I have she, her. I also use that on my name tags and in my email signature as a way to normalize it for other people so that it's not like, oh, if somebody is using pronouns, then they must be a transgender man or woman. And that's not always the case. So we should offer opportunities to normalize this for everybody. So again, in Zoom names, you can put your pronouns. In email signatures, you'll see I have my pronouns. On name tags, I always, if it's not included, I'll write it underneath it. Just as a way of really trying to make it more inclusive for everybody around. And the common usage of pronouns really helps everybody, not just somebody who might be transitioning, but it can really help everybody be called or referred to in a way that resonates with them. Religious inclusivity. So there's a lot here. Under the Civil Rights Act, Title VII, it prohibits discrimination and harassment based on religion and requires employees or employers to reasonably accommodate the beliefs and traditions of an employee. And they actually relaxed what reasonably accommodates means. So now, unless it actually affects your business, you have to accommodate people, which is great. So examples of accommodations, this links to a whole article on different accommodations, but here are some examples. So you can make schedule changes, granting leave for religious observance with floating holidays. So like right now, it's the third day of Passover. And obviously like we're in a semester, so I have to be here and I have to work and I have to do that kind of thing. But if you're in a workplace where you have the ability to give them time off or to have floating holidays, so that they can actually observe their religious holidays, that would be great, because in most workplaces and in schools, we cater more towards Christian identity. So we have Christmas off, we observe Easter on that following Monday, but other religions don't have the benefit of just having national holidays off here. So you can facilitate a dedicated physical space for prayer or meditation. This is especially important. Like we just went through Ramadan, where Muslims have an increased amount of prayer time. So it's really important for them to have a dedicated space to do that. And not just a closet, but like an actual nice space for them to be in. Considering shift changes or job reassignments to accommodate religious practices. making special allowances for attire or grooming practices aligned with the employee's beliefs. And again, you can't ask somebody what religion they are, but you can just offer policies that are inclusive to all religious identities. Taking reasonable action to prevent or address harassing behavior from other employees and even customers. This is really important. If you want to have an inclusive environment, then you have to be willing to stand up for employees that exist in the margins and might not have the same amount of power that you have. So then a religious example that I have is Ramadan. So Ramadan is the 9th month of the Islamic calendar. It's observed by Muslims worldwide as a month of fasting, prayer, reflection, and community. And this time changes. So it follows the Islamic calendar. It doesn't follow the typical 12-month calendar. So the time of Ramadan changes every year. So here are 7 ways that you can support coworkers during Ramadan. You can offer break options for fasting staff. You can offer flexible work hours, schedule training events after Ramadan, book meetings in the morning, be mindful of workloads, no calls after dusk, and check in with fasting employees. So they're fasting for an entire month while the sun is up, which means they're not going to have as much energy. The energy that they do have is going into their community, going into self-reflection, going into prayer. And it's really hard to focus on other things outside of that. So be mindful when you're scheduling during the month of Ramadan or during other religious holidays. Racial equity, being anti-racist. So the opposite of racist is not racist. The opposite of racist is being actively anti-racist. So actually making policies, actually doing things to be anti-racist. Anti-racism is a core leadership competency. And if you're a white leader, especially, and you're not personally engaged in learning and understanding racism and oppression, then you're not doing your job. It's kind of like when people stay silent, they're on the side of the oppressor. So if you're not actively trying to make change, then you are part of the problem. I linked here How to Be an Anti-Racist by Kendi. This is a fantastic book. I could not recommend it higher. This is linked in 3 different places in this PowerPoint. And then Becoming Anti-Racist as a White Person. So this is following from Kendi's book. It's just a 5-page document that has a step-by-step guide basically of things that you can implement and do as a white person to be anti-racist, whether that's just in life or in the workplace. So this is a roadmap towards racial equity. And I feel like I planned a little too much in here because we only have 15 minutes left. But racial equity in the workplace is the process of eliminating racial disparities and also ensuring that everyone has a fair opportunity to both start and advance and succeed in their careers, regardless of their race or ethnicity. So with that, you first need to be aware of the problem. And everybody needs to be aware of the problem. Then you need to do a root cause analysis. Does everyone in the organization understand the systemic causes of inequity? You need to get to the root cause. It's not just about slapping a Band-Aid on it. As a solution, we're really trying to change those systems of oppression. Have empathy. So once you're informed that there is a problem, do members of an organization actually care enough to make a change? Because that's really important. Strategy, is there a solution for correcting the problem? Is there a solution that already exists that you know of that you can do, or do you need to find something else? And then sacrifice. This is going to take some sacrifice. Is everyone willing to do enough to do what it takes to reach diversity, equity, and inclusion goals? And these steps are important for an organization with DEI goals to genuinely address systemic problems, helping to ensure that good intentions are backed by lasting results. Again, we're not looking for a Band-Aid solution here. We're really looking to change the system. And some ways that we can do that are implement blind recruitment practices so that you can reduce the unconscious bias during the screening process, establish mentorship and sponsorship programs to help people advance, conduct pay equity audits. This is important whether it's for people with different racial backgrounds, different gender identities, different abilities. Conduct pay equity audits to make sure that everybody is getting paid fairly and equitably. Create employee resource groups, implement diversity metrics so that you can actually track these, and make sure that your company is on goal to meet diversity metrics, and also inclusivity metrics. Provide cultural competency training for everybody in the office so that everybody has the training from the senior execs to the low-level employee. Regular review of policies and procedures. So go back to your policies and procedures and look to see if there is any harmful language, harmful policies, things that you can change. Support supplier diversity. Bring suppliers on that are from diverse backgrounds. And encourage employee feedback. This is really going to help you as you start to make changes. And promote leadership diversity. Disability equity and inclusion. So the Americans with Disabilities Act, I've mentioned it before. Compliance with the ADA is essential, but that is really just a starting point. We need much more than what is currently in the ADA. So disabled individuals are employed at significantly lower rates. Sometimes this is because they cannot work in a workplace. They have to work from home, and maybe that option isn't available. Sometimes it's because they have medical issues to address, and that takes time, that takes them away from the office, and that can be an issue for some employers. So we need to really address this disparity by removing barriers. And then ableism is discrimination and prejudice against individuals with disabilities, and that really must be addressed in order for us to have an inclusive environment for individuals with disabilities. So this is a link to the National Disability Institute. They had all of these things that I'm about to share. So you really need buy-in from executive level members. It must be seen and felt, not just posted about. Development of a DEIA committee, including accessibilities in that. Update or create mission statements and vision statements. Ensure non-discriminatory language. Opening your hiring recruitment efforts to include state-run vocational and rehabilitation centers so that people with disabilities can be part of the talent pool selection. Offer positions that align with someone's abilities. Have a discussion with all staff about accommodations. Identify an organization to partner with that provides captioning services. So I think the captions are on for this. This is really great for anybody with a hearing impairment or auditory processing issues. Treat disability harassment seriously. Protect the people that work for you and make sure that they feel protected and they feel heard. And make it the responsibility of everybody in the organization to promote an atmosphere of equity. You need buy-in from all levels. And I think this is the last one, so I can finish it up to have a couple of minutes for question Q&A. So inclusivity for working parents. Many professionals have to juggle the act between work and family obligations. So creating an inclusive workplace for parents and guardians helps your company bottom line, especially because working mothers comprise a third of all women in the workforce, and 80% of households have at least one parent that's full-time employed. And studies show that happy workers outperform their peers. So happiness is a very critical indicator of an organization's health and sustainability, especially now as we're having a culture shift. So some practices that you can have are flexible work arrangements, offering remote work options, family care benefits, especially while the cost of childcare is astronomical right now. Lactation rooms. This is important, but also on average, women breastfeed for 1,800 hours a year. That is like a full-time job for them. So give them the space that they need to take care of their lactation. Return to work problems, helping people phase in so that you can retain them. Inclusive parental leave policies. So offer parental leave not just to mothers, but to fathers, to all caregivers, to adoptive parents, to anyone that falls into the role of a parent or a caregiver. and really go forth with empathy, recognition, and an open line of communication. So that is everything. I know I just threw a ton at you. I really wanted to go for breadth here, but also there's so much that I couldn't touch on. So I have just pages of linked resources. So there's articles, there's stuff from NPR, there's stuff from Harvard, there's LinkedIn articles, there's handouts, all linked here. And most of them, I tried to find ones that focus right on the workplace. But if you want to know more about DEI, feel free to reach out to me. This is my email. This is my LinkedIn. I do research in this area, so I have a lot of resources that aren't necessarily tied to the workplace that I'd be happy to share. And if there's something that I don't know, I know a lot of people in this area that I could point you to that know far more than I do. So with that, I'm sorry I went a little bit over, but we have a little bit of time for Q&A.
CJ, thank you so very much for your time today and really just sharing with us how to get started in creating a roadmap and a strategy for managing a diverse workforce. We are so grateful for that. We do have some questions that have come through, so I will get started with those questions, CJ. So the first question submitted: what suggestions would you make to leaders in terms of how often and how they keep the dialogue on DEIB alive throughout the year, so that it's not simply a conversation that is talked about once a year? And then part B with that, CJ, are there companies you would highlight who have integrated this topic into their continuous dialogue with their workforce?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it should be something that we always talk about. So whenever you're putting out like marketing, you should talk about how diverse people would react to what you're putting out. I think that the way that we do that, though, is by having a diverse team. So talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion becomes a lot more natural when you have a lot of people on your team that exist in the margins, because they're going to bring forth those different perspectives. I think that it's different when you have a team that is very homogenous. Maybe just like a team just full of, white people, or just a team full of white men, where they have a pretty singular perspective, and then it feels more like you have to force these conversations. So I think really starting with a diverse group of people in the room, so it's almost a constant when you have those conversations. I'm not sure if that fully answered the question.
No, CJ, that's great. And then just any companies you might highlight who have already integrated this topic into their dialogue with the workforce on a continuous basis.
Yes. Honestly, Google. So Google is not the best company out there. They have a lot of flaws, but I will say they have an entire area dedicated to belonging. So within their Google belonging, and you can look it up, they made it accessible for everybody. So you can go and look at what they're doing, and you can take what they're doing and implement it. There's also there was a handbook. This is a handbook. I cannot off the top of my head remember what company I took this from, but it's Practices to Advance Racial Equity in Workforce Planning. And it's a whole handbook on how to do it. And some other companies, just broadly, I would look at companies that are minority owned, because a lot of times they build this into their mission and their values. There was a quote I shared from somebody who has an arts organization. It's linked there. He has an entire article on what his company is doing to try to promote these efforts and these initiatives.
Thank you, CJ. That's great. This next question here. So talking about the roadmap, how long does it typically take from the start of workplace DEI efforts before seeing measurable progress towards goals, particularly when looking at areas like recruitment, retention, and pay equity?
I think that depends on how fast you work and how fast you can dismantle harmful systems that are in place, and how long those systems have been in place. So I'll give you the example from the university side. So I'm working on a project, and it's been years at this point, where we interviewed BIPOC students to understand their experiences in the School of Engineering, so that we could have some actionable steps to take. And just the research, getting the data to understand what the problem is, it's been like 3 years. So it can take a long time, especially at large corporations where there's a lot of red tape and bureaucracy. But you can see some things almost immediately. So the use of inclusive terminology can be felt immediately. Doing things like just putting your pronouns in your Zoom or in your email can be felt immediately. Obviously, those are lower hanging fruits and more like a band-aid solution than actually overturning the entire system. But overturning an entire system and following this roadmap, it is going to take years to actually see this happen. Even with hiring strategies, you can bring in a bunch of people from diverse backgrounds, and that's great. But it's going to take time for them to really embed themselves in the organization and to see those ripples of change. So if you start implementing something, don't feel disheartened if you don't see changes right away, because this stuff, it takes real time and real work to see these things happen.
Absolutely. CJ, this next question that was submitted, when you live in an area that isn't very diverse, how can we get started with being more diverse and inclusive?
That's a good question. Yeah, I'm from Northern Maine. It is the whitest state in the entire US. So I get that. If you're in a place where maybe you don't have racial diversity, there's other types of diversity that you can have, right? So gender diversity, 50% of the population is women, yet we don't make up 50% of boardrooms. So you could focus on other areas. There's people that live with disabilities everywhere. Even if you don't have racial diversity, there's other types of diversity that you can look for, even religious diversity. Obviously, the US is heavily Christian, but there's a lot of people that fall into different categories. So if you don't have like racial diversity, you can look for other forms of diversity. Or if you don't have necessarily a diverse team, you can double down on different trainings to at least expose them to other types of diversity. You can look at diversity of suppliers. So this is something that I think Target has been like really good about. They have a lot of Black-owned businesses that they support, not just during February, but year-round, and they highlight them. So even if you don't have a diverse team or a diverse hiring pool, there's other ways for you to add diversity.
CJ, thank you so much. I know we're really close to the top of the hour. You have your office hours coming up, and I appreciate all the work that you are doing, both when it comes to DEI with all the students here at UB. We are so thankful to have you part of not only our alumni community, but our campus community as well. So thank you for everything that you're doing, CJ. With that said, just on behalf of the School of Management, the Office of Alumni Engagement, thank you all for joining us today. We have recorded today's session. You're going to receive an email tomorrow with that information. CJ has also so kindly uploaded her slides. So if you go to the resource section of your Zoom taskbar, go ahead and download those so you can have those and take those with you as well. And then if you'd like to continue dialogue, have more conversations with CJ, LinkedIn is here as well as her email. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to turn it over to CJ for any closing remarks.
Thank you all for coming. This is really a first step in trying to make some change. So if you want to have a longer conversation, or if you want to learn more outside of just DEI in the workplace, feel free to reach out to me. I love talking about this stuff. I have obviously a ton of resources, but I have other resources that are more like historically focused or theory focused or research focused than the ones that I shared here. I really tried to keep it workplace focused. But I would love to continue the conversation. And thank you all for coming and being open to growth and change. And thank you for having me.
CJ, thank you. It's our pleasure. And thank you for sharing with us how to be open to growth and change. So with that said, I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Take care, stay well, and go Bulls. Thanks, CJ.
Thank you.